Over the years, our beautiful city, Washington, D.C., has developed into a large, multicultural society. There are so many career opportunities that draws people to this beautiful DMV area. Tourists travel from far and near to see the National Monument, the Lincoln Memorial, and many historical museums. And you can find any type of food you desire in these diverse localities. But underneath all the beautiful and charmed attractions, there's people like you and I that struggle from day to day with normal issues. There's also people in the DMV area that suffer from anxiety, PTSD, depression, and other mental health issues. Some issues are caused by traumatic incidents, and some issues are caused from daily situations that we find ourselves stumbling into just by living our normal lives. We are often taught as children to watch what you say or don't talk too much. But right now and today, we are stopping the silence. DMV Madam D is here to tell you you are not alone. And this is your platform to help stop the silence. We will discuss daily issues in which we all struggle with as regular people who simply just want to live in content and comfortable in our normal lives. Do not feel the need to keep your mouth covered about your emotions and feelings. It's okay to not be okay. So uncover your mouth, DMV, and welcome Madam D in Stopping the Silence.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Stopping the Silence. And today's topic is the masculine emotions. And we're so excited to have Dr. Hopkins with us. Dr. Hopkins, how are you doing today? And welcome to Stopping the Silence.
Thank you for having me. I'm doing just fine. It is a pleasure to be here.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. So tell us about yourself and where can we find you on social media?
Sure, absolutely. So my name is Dr. Justin Hopkins, and my social media is at Dr. J.S. Hopkins. That's D.R.S. as in Scott, my middle name. D.R.J.S. as in Scott Hopkins. That's D.R.J.S. Hopkins. That's Instagram, Twitter, and Clubhouse. Try to keep it consistent so folks can find me. To give a little bit of an introduction, should I dive into that?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. So I'm a clinical psychologist, and I'm also a speaker and a consultant on issues pertaining to race, mental health, gender, trauma, and a number of other topics along the mental health category, right? And I have a private practice, a psychotherapy practice, where I work with adults and couples. I do couples therapy as well. And my practice really focuses on helping people to learn about themselves with a level of depth and insight that then enables them to live a more fulfilling life, right? Because once we're more aware of the various parts of ourselves that we may not necessarily be in tune with, we can then be better informed to make decisions for ourselves that will benefit us in the long run, and also just feel more purposeful and fulfilling. That may sound a bit simple, but it's actually really complicated. I believe we have a conscious mind and an unconscious mind, and there's more unconscious than conscious. Right? So there's a tremendous amount that we can learn about ourselves, and that's the kind of work that I do on a daily basis.
All right. Well, thank you for what you do, Dr. Hopkins. Thank you. So as a therapist, what are some issues that men typically have?
It's a great question. I see quite a good number of men in my practice. And what I find is that a lot of men struggle with emotions from others, as well as their own emotions. And for many of us men, we are socialized to produce, provide, protect, get outcomes, accomplish, even conquer or dominate, compete, right? It's about grit and getting outcome and results. And for a very long time, emotions have not factored into the identity that we call man, right? Like manhood does not allow for one to feel, right? To have experiences that don't feel okay, right? And it's a really dehumanizing experience, because we're human, right? And all humans feel, all humans have emotions. But for so long, for many of us men, we were brought up with phrases like "man up," "boys don't cry," right? "Toughen up." And really, what we're over the course of that, of that upbringing, right? What boys and men really learn is that they cannot have their own sense of humanity, their own feelings, and still claim to be a man. And that puts us in an incredible bind that leads to a lot of distress for many men. It makes us strangers from ourselves. We may not know what we feel or desire. And it makes it hard to understand the emotions of other, which can lead to breakdown in relationships and communication. So a lot of the times when this manifests is actually further down the road, when men are seeing issues in their marriages and relationships with family members, or the person they're dating, or even with bosses and friends, right? And so when it comes to communicating and particularly being in touch with our emotions, a lot of men are at a disadvantage, and that can lead to some distressing situations.
Yeah. So how can men make themselves aware of their own emotions?
I think in order to do that, right, zooming out as far as we can, I think we got to think about what we mean by the word manhood. Like, we have to redefine manhood to allow ourselves to be men and also human. There's nothing wrong with masculinity. There's nothing wrong with being a man in the sense of being masculine. But we also have to recognize anyone can perform masculinity or femininity. And femininity, even when I say that word, I think a lot of men think automatically our association is something that's lesser than. That's what I would say is kind of patriarchal thinking, right? Like, we live in a patriarchal society, a male-dominated society. But the side effects of that, the privilege that we are afforded by being male, is through this notion that men can be better leaders, or we're superior in some way. These aren't ideas that we say out loud, or even would say that we espouse consciously. But we know that as a man that we shouldn't be too emotional. We know that we associate emotions with women, and we know that in order to be a man, there are certain things that we expect of ourselves and others expect of us as well, that don't involve how we feel, right? So I think we have to redefine what it is that we will mean by manhood. And then also, from moment to moment, to be a little more practical, when we find ourselves in situations where we're having a disagreement, or we're uncomfortable, or we're just not happy, just take a moment to stop. Instead of going from A to C, right? There's a belief, there's something in the middle, right? Usually, like, we could say, like, A is an activating event, B is a belief, and C is like kind of an emotion. And a lot of times we can't even get to the emotion because we don't even know what we think in that moment that led us to that feeling, right? So we can stop and pause to think about what it is that we're believing in that moment. And then also connect with what it is that we're feeling. And just know that it's okay for those things. Like, it's okay, whatever you feel, it's okay to feel that way. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to be sad, happy, joyous, distraught. It's okay. It's okay to feel that way. You're only human, and you deserve to feel. We all need to. So take a pause in moments when you start to notice that you're upset with something, to kind of do some reflective work. That can be really helpful.
Yeah, and I think sometimes too, just with men and women, I don't think that we know where the feelings come from. I don't think that we know how to describe our feelings at times.
Absolutely. Yeah, feelings are complicated. And we pit them against logic as if they don't make any sense. But really, feelings are information. They're sensory information about what we experience and how our bodies are resonating with our experience. And if we take the time to reflect, we can uncover what they're trying to say to us about who we are and what we're experiencing. And that's really rich information. Sometimes you only get in the therapy room, but you can also get it from being more self-reflective and trying to be mindful and present in the moment, and be curious about what it is you experience rather than judging it
Yes.
trying to label it as right or wrong.
Yes, I agree. So why do you think men suppresses their emotions?
It's just survival tactic for many
Yeah.
of us, and it's
Mhm.
attached to our identities as
Mhm.
being a man in a traditional sense.
Yeah.
I think, going back to what I said about living in a patriarchal society where, male leadership and male influence is kind of the standard, right? Like anyone can abide by that thinking, right? So there are
Right.
men who bash other men who
Yes.
have emotions. There are women who bash other men. There are non-binary folks who bash other men for having emotions, right? Like so as a man, right, to not be bashed, you may hide your emotions, not express your emotions,
Yes.
repress those parts of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
part of the healing is kind of fostering an ethic of empathy amongst
Mm-hmm.
men being able to find spaces where they can emote, they can feel, and therefore foster deeper, more rich relationships with themselves, but also the loved ones in their lives as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So why do you think men want to constantly prove themselves to others or be in competition?
That's a good question. So there's a stand up by Chris Rock. This is some years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was pretty funny. He said, only women and dogs are loved unconditionally.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember that. Uh-huh.
Yeah. And everyone died laughing. There's always been a hint of truth in comedy, right? But
Mm-hmm.
what he's getting at, and what he goes on to explain, is that as a man, you have to provide something. You have to bring something to the table in order to
Yeah.
be appreciated or welcome. You have to
Mm-hmm.
produce. You have
Yeah.
to yield some sort of outcome that's beneficial to others.
Mm-hmm.
There's the saying, happy wife, happy life.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Yeah.
story just kind of ends there. And it's, and
Yeah.
on a subliminal level, what it leaves out the other person, right? And well,
Yeah.
that's not even subliminal. It just does, right? Like, but on a
Right.
subliminal level, what it says is, your purpose here is to do for others,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think we all should do for other people, right? Love
Most
thy neighbor
definitely.
is
Yes.
is an important principle across every religion,
Yes.
and
Yes.
yet also, right, what happens for a lot of men is our worth is wrapped up in what we produce, what we afford for others, what kind of results can we get in this life.
Right.
And if that's where your value is placed, you're always going to need to achieve more. You're always going to need to produce more. You're always going to need to fend against
Yes.
the threat of not being good enough based on what it is that you're producing. So there can be that competition and that sense of drive that really can be endless for a lot of us, to not be inadequate, but to always be doing more. And that's an exhausting way to live. And really, I'd like to see more men um, just treat themselves more humanely, more
Mm-hmm.
humanly, have a little bit
Yeah.
more compassion, and know that their worth exceeds what we do. But it's more about who we are and the fact that our life matters.
Yes. Yes. So in your profession, what is the key component to why men have failed relationships?
I definitely think it's about this. What we were just saying about men and emotions, right?
Yeah.
Communication is there. There's an author by the name of Harville Hendrix. He's a psychologist, and he wrote the book "Getting the Love You Want." It's a fantastic book.
Mm,
Anyone who's listening to this, who is considering couples therapy or just interested in enriching their life with a loved one or a partner, it's a fantastic book. He and his wife do this kind of work, and it's really about communication, right? And
mm,
what he said in one of his promotional videos is communication is one of the most dangerous things that any of us do, because we're saying things that are actually rooted in experiences that we don't quite understand, or or are aware of, you know? So
Mm.
and the outcome then, you know, no wonder we might be confused by the outcome, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah, I hear things all the time in my therapy room, you know, I told her the truth, what's the problem? Or
Mm. Yeah.
right, I did X, Y, Z, and ABC. Why is she unhappy with me? There's a roof over her head, there's food on the table, there's clothes on our backs. We went on vacation the other month. You know, there's so many other things that are involved in communicating in relationships. And again, because of how men and boys are socialized, we can be at a disadvantage. So communication is inherently rooted in the feelings that we have. We are not always aware of our feelings. As humans, we're not. And not always aware of the situations that lead to those feelings, right? And
Mm-hmm.
again, so for men, when it comes to communication, it can really be helpful for us to think about what it is we feel and why we feel and the outcome that we'd like to have before we even give a response, particularly when we're stressed or in a heated or high stakes conversation.
And also, too, on the flip side of communication, I think understanding is important in any relationship.
Oh,
How often do
absolutely.
you come by people having issues with just understanding? Because, like you just alluded to, you know, when people can say, "Hey, I've done this, I've done that," but it's the understanding part that some people just don't get. Some people just don't have that,
Mm-hmm.
and that
Yeah,
situation
right,
don't get better.
right. Like the understanding is the bedrock of love, of
Yeah.
intimacy. You
Mm-hmm.
have to understand each other, and you got to communicate in order to understand, right? So there's like,
Yes.
you know, you got to go through the valley before you get to paradise.
Yeah, that is so
That's
true.
and the communication being the hard part, right?
Yeah.
Um, and when we're upset with each other, you know, when we argue or when we have issues in communication, it's really the hardest to understand, right? Like
Yes.
we may
Mm-hmm.
communicate from a place of hurt rather than a place of
Yeah.
curiosity or intrigue or reflection. So it can be really challenging, and I think that's where, you know, therapists, couples therapists in particular, can be really helpful because they can help mediate and slow things down, so you can become aware of what it is that's really happening beneath the words.
Yes. Yes. So, what would you say to single women who's trying to support a man who is struggling with his emotions?
Yeah, this this is a good one, right? What's the old saying? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, right?
Yes.
Um, we've all got to do our own healing work. We all
Yes.
have to embark on the journey of self-love and self-improvement for ourselves.
Yes.
Um, no one is going to grow us or help us evolve or accomplish what we want to accomplish in this life, but for what we do for ourselves. It's great when we have people along the side that support us, because we can't
Yes.
do those things in isolation or on our own,
No.
but
Mm-hmm.
they can't be done on our behalf. So just, if you're someone out there who's supporting a man who's struggling to understand his reactions and emotions or communicate or just be open to intimacy and
Mm-hmm.
vulnerability,
Mm-hmm.
just know that you can support them, you can encourage them, you can comfort them, you can notice when they're upset or hurt and try to provide a space that's safe. Avoid judgments, right?
Mm.
Avoid accusations, but speak more so from an I perspective about how you feel. Feelings are not
Mm.
arguable, right?
Yes.
So when you're upset with that person, right, it's important to say things like, when XYZ happened, I felt ABC. And I want you to know
Mm.
that I felt that way because that was really hard for me and I don't want to feel that
Mm.
way again.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Connecting, you know, what happened, what they did to how you feel and what your stance is on the matter. The last thing
Yeah.
I'll say is it's a skill to communicate. This is related. It's a skill. It is a skill to communicate a personal need that doesn't highlight your partner's deficits,
Yes.
right?
That's so true. I
Right.
think a lot
Like,
of us struggle with that.
oh, all the time, right? Because it's
Yeah.
so much easier to get angry, you know? It's so much
Mm-hmm.
easier to attack. Like, you never want to
Yeah.
spend time with me. You never want to go out.
Yes.
And really what you're saying, what you're saying is like, I would love to spend more time with you. I really enjoy when we spend time together. Or I'm feeling disconnected from you. I really need some
Mm.
quality time with you. right? It's so much easier to say like, hey, you suck at being a partner, instead of saying, what it is that you're needing from the person. That anger comes from, that hurt comes from a neglected need. And it's helpful to communicate the need rather than the accusation. All of that being said, right?
Right.
You can do all of those things, right? And the person also has to want to come to a place of more emotional insight and understanding.
Yeah. And as women, it's harder to just up and leave, that's the difficult part. When somebody's struggling with their emotions, it's harder to leave. So it's like, when do we, at what point do we stop trying and just to move on from a person who's dealing with their emotions?
Yeah, that's a great question. Everyone's different, right? Like everyone's going to have a different threshold. I think it's important to not lose yourself in relationships, right? Don't sacrifice your happiness, joy, the parts of you that you like, right? When it feels like you're taking up the issue more than the other person, right? That's a sign that it might not work out, and that you may need to move on for your sake, instead of sacrificing, for the other.
Yes. So before we let you go, Dr. Hopkins, what are some tools can you provide to men who are struggling with organizing their emotions so they won't act off impulses in a negative situation?
Oh, that's a good one. If we were in a therapy session, I would really break down for the individual person, the particular feelings that they need to be aware of, right?
Yeah.
So how can they be more mindful of their reactions in a given moment, right? So they're not just
a negative situation.
Yeah. Know how you respond to stress beforehand.
Yes.
Right, like doing the work of like thinking about how you respond to stress. When we're in a difficult situation and we're stressed, like our typical habits take over. Right?
Yes.
And stress is just fight or flight, flight, or freeze, right? So in difficult situations, we may fight and really defend ourselves or attack the other person. We may flee. We may kind of just, meaning emotionally, right? Like you may just agree with whatever the person says, not engage, not reveal anything honest, or even walk away from the conversation, stonewall, like close the door, right? Like we can do all of those things. Know how you typically respond, know what kind of results that typically yields, and try to do something different, right? Like it goes back to what I was saying before, like stop, pause, think about what it is you could be feeling before communicating. It's okay to say to someone, we're in a difficult conversation, I feel like I'm feeling something, I'm not aware of what that is, I just want to take a couple of minutes to like process what's happening here and decide what kind of outcome I want before we move forward. Hard to do when you're feeling heated and you just react, right? But taking that time out is can be really, really helpful.
Yes. And like you said earlier, I think sometimes we really just got to dissect our emotions and feelings and just learn how to just, just organize them and learn how to just calm ourselves down. And for me, it's more so, getting to the Word of God and just, letting the Word of God saturate me so I can be more into His nature. Yeah.
Absolutely. The spiritual grounding, I mean, it's so profound in our lives, right? It helps us to make meaning of everything. And it can really, really ground us in the most confusing of situations.
Yes. Dr. Hopkins, I want to thank you for blessing Stopping the Silence with your professionalism, your expertise, and your knowledge. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And
you're welcome.
Everyone out there, take care.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all for joining us with another episode of Stopping the Silence. Go and visit our website at www.stoppingthe-silence, and you will see all the episodes there. May God bless you, and remember that you are not alone. Help me to help you to stop your silence. May God bless you. Stopping the Silence.